Greetings, Savage fans. I'm all finished up with Thumper Life's carburetor, and I've taken it off my motorcycle. It's all ready to ship back to him. It has a PUDA components in it, needle jet and slide needle, and it has the all about carbs, float needle valve and seat, and it's running really good. But one concern I have is that I haven't been able to road test it, and so I want to send it to him just as it is so that he can put it on his motorcycle and test it, so that we all can learn whether or not these PUDA components are any good. It runs great in the garage. It has really good throttle response. It starts easy. Everything's looking sweet. The mixture screw, the carburetor body, someone had tried to drill the mixture screw out and screwed up the carburetor body, so this has a new oversized mixture screw in it that I manufactured. And so now it has a mixture screw with 7mm threads instead of 6mm threads. Other than that, all the geometry of the screw is identical. The PUDA carburetor kit had a TEV diaphragm air cutoff valve. It's intended to mitigate backfiring when you decelerate. And Thumper Life's old diaphragm was in really poor condition, so I replaced that with the PUDA item. So essentially there are three components in here offered by the PUDA kit. They're quite expensive if you buy OEM parts, and also two of the items, the slide needle and the needle valve, when you get other aftermarket kits, they're all screwed up, oversized, the things run way too rich. There's just nothing right about them at all. And also, other cheap carburetor kits have these bogus idle mixture screws that have the wrong geometry, and those things don't work any good either. So this PUDA kit has a lot of promise, but I am concerned that he'll get it on his motorcycle and it won't run just right. Might be a little off. And in that case, he's going to need to replace that slide needle and the needle jet with a genuine Suzuki parts. And he has ordered those parts and had them sent to me, and I have received them, but I didn't take them out of the package. I'm going to send them right back to him with this carburetor so that he can get this carburetor on his motorcycle just like it is now and give it a try, so we all can learn whether or not these PUDA carburetor kits are an option for us to avoid the astronomical expense of the OEM parts, and also just to have some parts available, because slowly but surely we're running out of options on these replacement parts. The early model carburetors, you can no longer get the needle valve and slide needle. The stuff's no longer available from Suzuki. So in the event that Thumper Life TL, that you get this carburetor and you get it installed and you're not totally satisfied with the way it performs, you may want to take those genuine Suzuki parts and put them in the carburetor. And so that's what this video is all about. I want to give you a little tutorial on exactly how to put those parts in. Hopefully you can stand watching this video. It's the first time I've tried anything like this with such small parts. So let's give it a whirl. We're going to take and change out the PUDA slide needle and the PUDA needle jet with OEM parts, and I'm going to show you how I would do it. Okay. To do this job, it's very important that you have a magnetic screwdriver. If you don't have a magnetic screwdriver, you are really gonna struggle, okay? So this screwdriver is slightly magnetic, so the screw will stick on the tip of the screwdriver, okay? It's also very helpful to have a pair of these surgical clamps. It helps you load the slide needle into the slide, and it's a difficult, tricky job because there's a spring and a little washer also on this assembly, and if you try to load it in there by sticking it straight down into the slide in the normal orientation, you're going to die like a rat. Everything's going to fall apart. So you get it clamped like this, and now you can take and load it into the slide sideways, actually at a slightly up angle like this. It allows the spring and the washer to stay on. You'll see when I get to that point what I'm talking about, okay? And I find that a sharp stick, like this is a chopstick, and a chopstick works really well. It helps you load the needle jet into the carburetor body, and then get the little slot in the needle jet. There's a little slot right there. Hopefully you can see that. And you have to be able to rotate the needle jet, and so this chopstick comes in handy. It helps you turn the thing until the pin lines up, and then you can shove the needle jet in all the way. Okay? All right, let's get started here. We're going to start by taking the slide out. Hopefully all of this is visible. I can't really see the camera that well, the screen, the iPad. Take the top of the carburetor off. Okay, 4 screws. Pull the top off, set it aside. I like to use it like a little tray. Throw the screws in there. Remove the spring. And you'll notice that there's a little flag, little area on the edge of the diaphragm that has to line up with a little, semicircular cutout right here in the carburetor body, so that you get the slide oriented correctly when you stick it in. It's easy to get this like this and not notice it, and then put the bonnet back on, and then you wreck the diaphragm. So pay attention to that when you're working on the carburetor. Make sure the little flag is lined up with that semicircular cutout in the carburetor body, and get it all packed into the grooves. Got a little raised lip on the diaphragm. You get that all packed into the groove for it before you put the bonnet back on. So we're going to pull the slide out, and we'll start working on that first. It's the hardest part of the job. I don't know if you can see down in there, but there's a couple little screws down in there. Let's see if we can get some light on this. Does that help? Can you see the little screws down in there? There's a plate. And those screws hold that plate in place and capture the slide needle. And so that's why this magnetic screwdriver is so important, why it comes in handy. Okay, so we're going to start by taking those 2 little screws out. The needle is spring loaded, so you see how I can pull it in and out? Spring makes it pop back. That allows the needle to float around and find its home inside of the needle valve, and prevents the thing from binding. Okay, and so that spring holds the E-clip, or if you're running one of the plastic spacers over the top, the E-clip, it holds all of that up hard against the retaining plate, and it sets the elevation of this screw in relation to the needle valve. So you don't want to have a situation where this is not floating around. You want it to be free to float around, move around, so that you don't end up with a slide that binds. So I like to pinch that needle and compress the spring, hold the spring slightly compressed, and then take the two very small screws that are in here. Start with one. That's why the magnetic screwdriver really comes in handy, because it helps you drag all this stuff out, and it definitely helps you get it back in. Okay, so there's the two screws that come out, and this is the retaining plate that holds the slide needle in place, locks it in place, and so I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here. You just turn it upside down and dump the assembly out. So this is the PUDA slide needle that comes with a kit. It's just slightly different. It's a little bit larger in diameter than the OEM slide needle, but the angle of the taper is exactly the same. So what that does is at each elevation of the needle, you know, as you move up the needle, if you compare it to the OEM needle, this needle's going to be just a little bigger, about 1/1000th bigger than the OEM needle. So that's why I've installed it without any spacer over the top of the E-clip. See the little E-clip right there? Normally that has a plastic spacer that's about 60-70 thousandths thick. I think the original equipment one is like 90 thousandths thick or somewhere in that vicinity, super lean. So we generally thin those spacers out to get a more reasonable mid-range fuel mixture. But because this PUDA needle starts out about 1/1000th larger in diameter at the tip, all the way up at each location, all the way up the needle, it's just going to be just a little bit bigger than the OEM needle, but you can solve that problem by just leaving the spacer out over the top of the E-clip and placing the E-clip on this needle in the lowest position, the lowest groove, because that raises the needle up. The normal position the needle comes up, nominally about 80-90 thousandths of an inch, and it rectifies that overlean condition that you would have if you ran the spacer on top of the E-clip. You'll notice that there's a washer on Thumper Life's assembly, the one that he sent me. This washer was missing. That washer is important. It keeps this spring from getting tangled up in the E-clip. Okay, so it gives the spring a nice flat 360-degree surface to seat against. So you don't want to leave that washer out. So we're going to take the spring off, and we're going to take the washer and set it down. And then we're going to set this PUDA slide needle aside, and we're going to grab the original equipment, genuine Suzuki slide needle. This is my genuine needle. Like I said, I didn't take Thumper Life's components out of their packaging. I just left them sealed, hermetically sealed. And so this is a 60 thousandths washer. It's significantly thinner than the OEM washer, or a spacer. It's a little thinner than Thumper Life's spacer, so I'm going to send this to him with all his other components so that he'll have a couple of spacers that he can play with. His is white. This is a black nylon piece. Okay, this little black spacer goes on top of the E-clip. Okay, so I'm just going to set that there like that, and I'm going to take the slide needle, and I'm going to place it on the plastic piece, the plastic spacer, and I'm going to push on it, and you see that it's started onto the slide needle. You can't leave it like that. It's good tight fit, and if you leave it like that, you know, it's going to make it, you might have a little difficulty getting the thing set up correctly, getting the retainer plate installed. It needs to be pushed all the way down so that it's hard against the E-clip, okay? So I'm just going to take this and give it a little shove, and boom. Okay, so now it all looks like one chunk. The E-clip with the black nylon piece hard up against the E-clip, okay? And as I mentioned previously, you got to have this washer. So the washer goes on first. The washer doesn't go under the spring, the washer goes on top of the spring, and then the little spring. Okay? Now we're going to take this and we're going to use the surgical clamps and we're going to get a hold of the thing. Okay? I'm just going to set this down for a sec. Now we're going to talk about the retainer plate a little bit. The retainer plate has this little dimple in it, right there. That's an orientation mark. If you turn it over, it's got a little tit on the opposite side. So it sticks up on this side, and it's got a dimple on this side, okay? If you put this retainer plate in with the dimple facing down, you're never going to get anything lined up in there because there's two holes in the slide that has to line up with these two cutouts right here. And then there's two holes that are threaded where the screws go. And if you put this retainer plate in with the dimple facing down, you can't get it lined up. I'm sorry, with the dimple facing down. You want to put it in with the little tit, with the little raised area facing down, okay? The PUDA kit also comes with a retainer plate, but if you look closely, you'll see that there's no dimple. That's unfortunate. I mean, you can still use it. It just makes it more difficult because you know you're going to have to figure out which is the downside to get things to line up, okay? So I prefer the OEM retainer plate. If you take and use a chopstick and you stick it on here like this, it makes it a lot easier to get this retainer plate down into the slide without it flipping upside down. If you just try and drop it in, it wants to flip upside down. Makes things difficult. You hold the slide at a slightly upward angle. If this is facing down and you go to load the needle in, the spring and everything falls off. So you want it kind of facing up, and you run this in like this, find the hole in the center, and pretty soon, there you go. Hang on to that needle now. You're ready to install the retainer plate and the little screws. That's where this magnetic screwdriver really comes in handy, these little screws. You need about 18 hands to do this job. Okay. There's a socket for the spring and the washer and the spacer and all of that stuff in the bottom of the slide. And so you need to get the needle pulled down into that socket and everything down deep into the socket so that you can get the retainer plate in there. This is going to be tricky to get on video, so I'm going to do my best. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. I use a chopstick to kind of get this retainer plate down in there, kind of close. I got it too tight, I think. I shoved it in too tight. I got it jammed on the chopstick. There. Loosen that up a little bit. And then down she goes. And naturally, I think I turned it over in the process. I did. Remember, the dimple's got to face down. Please forgive me if this isn't coming out well on the video. All right. Now that you got it down in there, you got to move it around until you get the holes to line up. And sometimes that can be a little difficult. But this time, not too bad. So I've got the holes in the retainer plate that line up with the threaded holes in the slide. They're lined up, and you can look in here, and you won't be able to see it on the video, but you can see that the little notches in the retainer plate are exposed, are open over the air vent holes in the bottom of the slide. Not only does the magnetic screwdriver not only does it try and pick up the screw, but it also tries to pick up the retainer plate, so it can be a real juggling act. I was close that time, almost had it. There. Let's try again. Please forgive me. I know you can't see what I'm doing right now. Okay. Just moving the retainer plate around, trying to find the sweet spot where the threaded holes line up and okay, that looks pretty good. We'll try again. Gotta be fast. There. So the first screw is started. That's half the battle right there. You get that first screw started. And now hopefully we can get this one. Okay. So I'm hoping that you guys can see in here. You can see the two holes that are open there? You can see light through the two holes. That's how you want it to look. You want those notches in the retainer plate to be open over those two holes. You don't want the retainer plate obstructing those two vent holes. Those two vent holes are what port vacuum to the top of the diaphragm so that the ambient pressure, atmospheric pressure, can overcome the spring force and lift the diaphragm. As the airflow goes up through the venturi, as the pressure starts to go down in the venturi, and that lower pressure is ported through those two holes to the top of the diaphragm, so that the pressure on the top of the diaphragm is significantly less than atmospheric pressure. And so, because it's a big diaphragm, the atmospheric pressure acts on the underside of the diaphragm and lifts the slide. It overcomes the force of the spring and lifts the slide up. It's a pretty cool gig, man. It keeps the velocity of the air constant. It tries to, anyways, at all the various RPMs. So you got the two screws in there. You don't need to get too ambitious with tightening them. They're little teeny screws. Even if they come out, they ain't going anywhere. They're trapped in here. Of course, if they came out, you'd be dead on the side of the road. You wouldn't be able to ride, but they ain't going to come out. They're not going to come out. They don't need much torque, okay? So now we have the OEM slide needle assembly installed in the slide. That's the toughest part of the job, okay? Set that aside. Now we'll change out the needle jet. You have to take the float bowl off to do this. We'll take the screws out of here. carefully remove the float bowl. You don't want to damage the floats. You don't want to knock them out of adjustment. They're really fragile. So this part of the job is pretty easy. You just take a common screwdriver and you break the main jet loose. Okay. I usually back it out about one turn, and then I take the handle of a screwdriver, the plastic handle, and just lightly tap on that main jet like that to break the needle jet free. Okay. This is the 145 PUDA main jet. It checks out with pin gauges, so it's a good jet. Thumper Life's carburetor right here has a dent in this area, so this aluminum is rolled over, so it's difficult to get this washer out sometimes. It doesn't want to just come out. Okay, and now you can just take the chopstick and just push on the needle jet, and it comes out the other side. Okay, this is the PUDA needle jet. I've already lapped it. Oops, sorry. I think we discussed in the post that the threads are a little funny in this thing. The PUDA main jets fit in just fine, but the OEM jets would bind up, and that's because I believe the OEM jets are M5 by 0.9 pitch, and these PUDA jets are M5 by 0.8 pitch. So I lapped this. I just took the OEM jet, the 152.5 that Thumper Life had in his carburetor, and I used lapping compound, and I just lapped it until it threads all the way in. So now, if you want to put this 152.5 in there, Thumper Life, if you don't think the 145 is big enough, you can thread the 152.5 in easily. If you want a 150 or a 147.5, you're going to have to lap them in yourself. You got to understand when you're lapping it, not only are you wearing a little material away from the internal threads in the needle jet, but you're also lapping away the external threads on the main jet. So, you know, each main jet that you want to use in it, you'll probably have to lap it. Another option is you could tap it out with an M5 by 0.9 tap, and then any jet should fit it. Okay, so now the PUDA needle jet is out of there, and we want to put an OEM needle jet in. This is an OEM needle jet. You can tell because it's silver. I learned something about this on this job. I thought these were stainless steel. They're not stainless steel. They're actually brass, but it's chrome plated. So it's chrome plated brass. I don't know why they chrome plated. It might give it a little better wear resistance, you know, because it is a common problem for the CV carburetors for the slide needles to wear out the needle jets, because the doggone slide is always bouncing like crazy. Okay, so just like we use the chopstick to push the needle jet out, we're going to use the chopstick to install the needle jet. Just run it in till it fits in the hole in the carburetor. And now you can see, though, that it's not all the way home. It's not all the way in. That's because the groove isn't lined up with a little pin in here. But it's close, and then I can rotate it, and then whoops, right there. Okay? Just hold it in place with the chopstick. Put the little washer in. Okay. Install the main jet. This is the 145, which is the stock size main jet. I have no idea what configuration Thumper Life's motorcycle is in. I've asked him that question. I haven't heard back from him yet whether or not he has, you know, any hot rod stuff on it. You don't need to get carried away tightening these. Just snug them up. So now the needle jet is installed. It's really about all there is to it. We're going to put it back together. I like to put the float bowl back on first so that when I'm fiddling around with the slide, I don't inadvertently crunch the floats and screw up the adjustment. You guys get the idea on the float bowl. 4 screws, you put them in, you tighten them up. Got to be a gasket in there. This will protect the float assembly while I load the slide in. You may have to play around with the slide a little bit to get the needle to enter the needle jet. I'm going to drop the slide in. You can see that I've got the little flag on the diaphragm, kind of close to where it's got to go, but I can see already it's hanging up. Okay, so you got to come in with your finger and you got to fiddle around with it till you can get the needle to enter the needle jet. We'll try this. There. Okay. Rotate it until the flag lines up perfectly, and then work the lip on the diaphragm into the groove in the carburetor body. Place the spring in there. Find the socket in the bonnet. And put the bonnet on. Being careful not to pinch the diaphragm. And put the 4 screws back in. I'm only going to put a couple of them in for right now because I got to take it all back apart anyways to put the other stuff back in before I send this off to Thumper Life. You always want to check the slide to make sure you can open it fully and release it. Okay. It's looking good. All right, so now I'm going to take this back apart and put the PUDA parts back in there, and I'm going to send this off to Thumper Life. Hopefully some of you find this video useful. Thumper Life, hopefully in the event that you have to feel the need to change back to the OEM components, to take the PUDA stuff out and put the OEM needle jet and slide needle in, this video should give you all the information you need to do that without having any problems, and it should work just fine. Okay, I'm going to sign off now and got to get this carburetor to the post office and get it back to its rightful owner. It's been a pleasure working on this carburetor, Thumper Life. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to play around with it. I think we all learned some stuff. I've got another one of those PUDA kits coming. I've ordered another one just to get a feel for how consistent the parts are manufactured. If I get a second kit where all the parts are in good shape, and usable, I'll let you guys know. All right, keep the shiny side up.